My name is Anya Thorne, and for 32 years, I've measured my life in the weight of clay. I'm a ceramicist, which is a gentle way of saying I spend most of my days covered in a fine layer of dust, coaxing shapes from the earth with my hands. My studio, a converted sunroom in my small house in Port Blossom, overlooks a garden I've painstakingly cultivated, filled with sea lavender and wild roses that thrive in the salty air. This little corner of the world, this quiet life of creation and solitude, is what I've built for myself. I thought, I truly did, that it was enough to finally earn me a seat at my own family's table, not as a guest, but as an equal. The illusion shattered on a Sunday afternoon, not with a dramatic crash, but with the quiet thud of a carelessly placed gift. I'd spent weeks working on a set of dinner plates for my family, each one hand-thrown and glazed in a shade of deep ocean blue that reminded me of the Port Blossom harbor at dusk. It was a peace offering, a way of saying, see? What I do has value. I can make beautiful things. I can contribute. We were gathered at Sea Glass Cottage, the charming two-bedroom house I owned near the water's edge. It was my first major purchase, bought with years of savings from art fairs and commissions. I'd poured my heart into its restoration, sanding the old floorboards myself and installing a backsplash of my own handmade tiles in the kitchen. But I didn't live there. My family did. My retired parents, Robert and Helen, my older sister, Serena, her husband, Grant, and their sweet 7-year-old daughter, Chloe. For them, I charged only a fraction of what it was worth. I presented the box of plates with a nervous smile. I made these for the cottage, I said, my voice softer than I intended. My sister, Serena, lifted one out, her manicured nails tapping against the glaze. Oh, there. Rustic, Annie, she said, the word hanging in the air like a veiled insult. She had always been the polished one, the one who worked in marketing for a sleek downtown firm, whose life was a curated collection of sharp angles and clean lines. My life, in contrast, was all soft edges and earthy textures. Grant, her husband, barely glanced up from his phone. He worked in logistics, a job he complained about endlessly, and carried a perpetual air of being unimpressed. He grunted something that might have been thanks. My mother, Helen, gave me a thin, tight smile. That's lovely, dear, she said, before immediately turning her attention back to Serena, asking about a promotion she was up for. My father, Robert, picked up a plate, weighed it in his hand, and set it back down. Still playing with mud, are we? He asked, not with malice, but with a weary, patronizing affection that was somehow worse. Good thing you have this place to fall back on. The comment landed quietly, without fanfare, but it hollowed me out. They didn't see the hours of labor, the skill, the love. They saw a hobby. They saw a child playing in the dirt. And the cottage wasn't my achievement, it was my safety net, the thing that gave my messy, artistic life a sliver of legitimacy in their eyes. Worse, it was a safety net they were using. Chloe was the only one whose eyes lit up. She traced the swirling glaze on a plate with her small finger. It looks like a wave, Auntie Anya, she whispered. It's beautiful. I hugged her, burying my face in her hair to hide the sudden sting in my eyes. The plates were stacked on a side table and forgotten. I stayed for another hour, a ghost in their Sunday afternoon, listening to chatter about office politics and school districts. I drove home with a familiar ache in my chest, the feeling of being perpetually on the outside of the family I was so desperately trying to hold together. That night, something didn't snap. It slowly, quietly began to fracture. I had to make them see that I wasn't the one leaning on them. I was the foundation they were all standing on, and it was beginning to crack under the weight. My life in Port Blossom is a deliberate construction of peace. It's a city that smells of salt and rain, where fog rolls in from the harbor to soften the edges of the old brick buildings. I chose it for its quiet rhythm, for the community of artists and craftspeople who understood the language of making things by hand. My own business, Lighthouse Ceramics, isn't a high-flying enterprise, but it's steady. It's mine. I sell my work through local galleries and an online shop that has a surprisingly loyal following. It pays the mortgage on my own small home, funds my garden, and keeps my kiln firing. It also paid for Sea Glass Cottage. I bought it 3 years ago, a neglected little house with good bones and a view of the water if you craned your neck from the attic window. I saw its potential, the way a potter sees a vessel in a lump of clay. With my savings, I brought it back to life. Real estate in Port Blossom, especially in the historic Harborview district, is not cheap. A place like the cottage could easily rent for $3,500 a month. But I don't rent it to strangers. I let my family stay there for $800 a month. I told myself it was the right thing to do. My father had taken an early retirement from his job at the city planning office due to health issues, and my mother's pension was small. Serena and Grant were always talking about how expensive life was, how they were saving for a down payment on a place of their own, though that goal seemed to be perpetually receding. And most importantly, there was Chloe. I wanted my niece to grow up with a garden to play in a safe and beautiful home. I thought I was giving them stability, a gift of love. It took me a long time to realize they saw it as their due. Growing up, Serena was the sun and I was her shadow. She was articulate, ambitious, and effortlessly popular. She got the scholarships, the lead roles in school plays, the admiring glances from our relatives. I was the quiet one, the observer, happiest with a sketchbook or a piece of clay in my hands. My parents, I think, were baffled by me. They supported my art in a detached way, paying for classes as one might pay for piano lessons, assuming it was a phase I would outgrow. When I declared my intention to pursue it as a career, their disappointment was a quiet, constant hum in the background of my life. Even now, with a successful business and a property to my name, they treat me with that same gentle condescension. It's in the way my dad explains basic financial concepts to me, or how my mom always introduces me as our artistic one, as if it's a charming but unfortunate condition. Serena, meanwhile, is lauded for her practicality, her corporate acumen, her real-world success, even though I was the one who owned the roof over all their heads. I tried to ignore the little things. The way Serena would post photos of the cottage on her social media with captions like "Sunday bliss at home," never once mentioning it was mine. The way Grant would make offhand comments about how the faucet was dripping or a floorboard creaked, as if I were a negligent landlord rather than a sister providing them with a home at a nearly 75% discount. My dad would call occasionally, not to chat, but to inform me that the property taxes were due, a subtle reminder of my financial obligations to them. I tried to talk to Serena about it once, a few months ago. We met for coffee downtown. I gently brought up the rising property values in Harborview, hoping she might acknowledge the magnitude of the gift I was giving them. She just stirred her latte and laughed, a light, tinkling sound that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, Annie, don't start getting a big head about it. You're lucky you have us to look after the place for you. All that maintenance would be a nightmare for a single person." Grant, who had joined us, chimed in. "Yeah, you'd be lost without us. Who would you call when the pipes burst?" Their words stung. Lost? I was the one keeping them afloat in one of the most desirable neighborhoods in the city. I let it go, as I always did. Arguing felt like chipping away at the fragile peace I was trying to preserve. But a seed of resentment had been planted, and it was beginning to take root. They weren't grateful. They were entitled. And I was the one enabling it. One evening, I confided in my boyfriend, Ethan. He's a landscape architect, a man who, like me, finds solace in shaping the natural world. We've been together for 2 years, and he's seen the dynamic with my family up close, his quiet presence a stark contrast to their noisy demands. We were sitting in my garden as the sun set, turning the sky the color of ripe peaches. I told him about the plates, about my father's comment, about Serena's casual dismissal. He listened patiently, his hand covering mine. When I finished, he didn't offer easy platitudes. He looked at me, his gaze clear and steady. Anya, he said softly, a gift that isn't received is just a burden to the giver. You're carrying the weight of their comfort, and they're not even thanking you for it. You're not their safety net. You're their landlord, their benefactor, and their emotional punching bag, all rolled into one. His words didn't burn, they illuminated. He was right. I had been so focused on being the dutiful daughter, the supportive sister, that I had forgotten to be my own advocate. That night, looking out at the beautiful life I had built for myself, I felt a flicker of something new. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was determination. A quiet, firm resolve began to harden within me, like clay in a kiln. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I could not continue to let my kindness be mistaken for weakness. The cottage was a symbol of my hard work and my success. It was time I reclaimed it. The quiet crack in my resolve became a fissure a few days later, thanks to a woman named Isabel. She was a friend of Serena's, someone I knew peripherally from a few awkward family functions. She called me out of the blue, her voice hesitant and laced with guilt. Anya, I don't know if I should be doing this, she began, but I can't sit on it. I feel like you deserve to know. Isabel explained that she'd been out for drinks with Serena and a few others from their marketing firm. Serena, after a couple of glasses of wine, had been holding court, bragging about her clever living situation. Isabel, uncomfortable with the conversation, had recorded a short voice memo on her phone, intending to show it to a mutual friend as an example of Serena's arrogance. Instead, she decided to send it to me. You have to hear this, she said, her voice dropping. I'm so sorry. A moment later, the audio file appeared in my texts. I pressed play, my heart thumping a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. Serena's voice, artificially bright and sharp, filled the silence of my studio. It's honestly the perfect setup, she was saying, followed by the sound of tinkling laughter from her friends. My little sister, the artist, owns this gorgeous cottage in Harborview. She's so lost in her little art world, she has no idea what it's actually worth. We pay her, like, $800 a month. It's a steal. She thinks she's being supportive while Grant and I save up. There was a pause, then the punchline. We're never leaving. She's too much of a pushover to ever kick us out. We've got it made. The recording ended. I sat there, phone in hand, the silence in the room now deafening. The words echoed in my head. Lost in her little art world. Pushover. We've got it made. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a complete and utter negation of me. My generosity wasn't seen as love, it was seen as naivete. My kindness wasn't a strength, it was a weakness to be exploited. My entire identity, in her eyes, was that of a fool. I listened to it again, and then a third time. Each listen chipped away at the hurt and replaced it with a cold, hard clarity. My dad's condescending remarks, my mom's silent complicity, Grant's sneering comments, they all snapped into focus. This wasn't a family struggling to get by, accepting help with humility. This was a calculated, long-term exploitation, and my own sister was the architect. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my desk and pulled up the financials for the cottage. The mortgage, the insurance, the property taxes, the constant small repairs I paid for without a second thought. I was losing money every month, subsidizing their comfortable life in a prime location while they secretly mocked me for it. I was not their safety net. I was their secret trust fund. The next day, I made an appointment with a property lawyer. The day after that, I called my family and told them I needed to have a meeting at the cottage that evening. It's important, I said, my voice betraying none of the turmoil inside me. Serena sounded annoyed, but agreed. When I arrived, they were all gathered in the living room, an unspoken impatience radiating from them. Chloe was at a friend's house for a sleepover, a small mercy I was grateful for. I didn't sit down. I stood by the fireplace, the mantelpiece adorned with photos of their family, and looked at each of them. I'm making some changes regarding the cottage, I began, my voice steady. The market rate for a home like this in Harborview is $3,500 a month. Starting on the 1st of next month, that will be the rent. Silence. Serena's perfectly made-up face went slack with shock. Grant, who had been scrolling on his phone, looked up, a flicker of disbelief in his eyes. My father's expression hardened. Serena found her voice first. 3,500? Are you insane, Anya? That's impossible. We can't afford that. That's the value of the property, I said calmly. I've been subsidizing your life here for 3 years. That subsidy is ending. We're your family, my father boomed, his face turning a blotchy red. This is how you repay us? After everything we did for you? All those art classes, all that support? The old guilt, the familiar weapon. This time, it glanced right off me. The art classes were a long time ago, Dad. And I've more than repaid that investment. My support for you has been covering your living expenses in one of the most expensive parts of the city. Grant leaned forward, his voice a low sneer. So this is it, huh? The little artist finally decides to play hardball. This isn't a game, Grant, I said, meeting his gaze. This is a financial reality. You have 30 days. You can either sign a new lease at the market rate, or you can find another place to live. You'd kick out your own family? Your niece, my mother whispered, her first contribution to the conversation. It was a perfectly aimed dart, meant to find its mark in my conscience. Chloe's living situation is her parents' responsibility, I replied, my heart aching as I said her name. You have a choice. You can pay what the home is worth, or you can move. The choice is yours. I turned and walked out before they could say another word. The drive home was a blur. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was the adrenaline of finally standing up for myself. The text started before I even got in my front door. A long, rambling message from Serena, accusing me of being selfish, cruel, and money-obsessed. A curt one from Grant, you'll regret this. My dad sent one, too. Your mother is devastated. I hope you're happy. I didn't reply to any of them. I saved Serena's voice memo, along with a copy of our original, informal lease agreement. The battle had just begun, and for the first time in my life, I was ready to fight it. They had mistaken my quiet nature for a lack of strength. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The quiet aftermath of our meeting lasted less than 24 hours. The next morning, I awoke not to the gentle chirping of birds in my garden, but to the insistent buzzing of my phone. Serena had escalated things from private, angry texts to a very public performance. She had posted a carefully curated photo on her Instagram page, a sun-drenched shot of Chloe playing in the cottage's backyard, smiling innocently. The caption, however, was pure poison. Trying to cherish these moments before my own sister kicks us out on the street, she wrote. She's decided her investment property is more important than her family. Raising our rent to an impossible $3,500 overnight. Some people choose money over everything. So heartbroken for my daughter. The post was a masterpiece of manipulation. It painted her as the victim, me as the heartless, greedy landlord. She'd conveniently omitted the fact that they'd been living there for a pittance for 3 years. Comments from extended family and her wide circle of friends flooded in. That's shocking. How could she? Family should be sacred. Sending you strength, Serena. I felt a wave of nausea as I scrolled through the comments. She was twisting my act of self-preservation into an act of aggression. My first instinct was to jump in, to defend myself, to lay out the facts. But I heard Ethan's calm voice in my head, don't engage on her turf. That's a game you can't win. So, I took screenshots of the post and every single comment, meticulously saving them to a folder on my computer. I was building a record, a quiet defense against her very public attack. That evening, the threats became more direct. A text message arrived from a blocked number. A nice cottage like that is a real shame to see damaged. You should think about what you're doing. My blood ran cold. There was no signature, but the tone was pure Grant. It was clumsy, brutish, and meant to intimidate. This was no longer just a family squabble, it was veering into something darker. My hands trembled as I forwarded the message to Ethan. He called me immediately. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice a mixture of anger and concern. "Anya, this is serious. They're desperate, and they're lashing out." His steadiness was an anchor in my swirling anxiety. We talked for a long time. He didn't tell me what to do, but he helped me see the path forward. "Keep documenting everything," he advised. "The post, the comments, this text. They're giving you all the evidence you need to show they're operating in bad faith." A few days later, I had to go to the cottage. The plumber I'd hired to fix a leaky pipea repair I was still paying for needed me to let him in. I called ahead to let them know, but no one answered. I used my key, stepping into the quiet house. It was empty. My parents were out, Serena and Grant were at work, and Chloe was at school. The plumber went about his work in the bathroom while I waited in the kitchen. As I leaned against the counter, my eyes fell on the backsplash, the one I had so lovingly crafted. A dozen of the deep blue, wave-pattern tiles right behind the stove were shattered. A network of fine cracks radiated from a central impact point, as if someone had slammed a hammer into the wall. My breath caught in my throat. This was not accidental. This was a deliberate act of destruction. It was a targeted strike against me, against my art, against the very thing that defined me. The plates had been a gift they'd dismissed, the tiles were a part of the home they were trying to ruin. It was a message, scrawled in broken ceramic: "Your creations are as fragile as you are." My fury was a clean, hot flame. I took out my phone and documented the damage from every angle. I sent the photos to Ethan with a simple message: "Look what they did." His response was immediate: "That's it. You need to protect yourself, legally." I called a tile contractor, who quoted me over $1,000 to repair the custom work. The cost was secondary. The violation was what seared me. They had defaced my home and my work. They had crossed a line from which there was no coming back. That afternoon, I was in my lawyer's office, a sleek, impersonal space that felt a world away from my dusty studio. I laid everything out on his polished mahogany desk: the screenshots of the Instagram post, the threatening text message, the photos of the shattered tiles, and the voice memo from Serena. Mr. Peterson, a man with kind eyes but a no-nonsense demeanor, reviewed the evidence in silence. When he looked up, his expression was grim. "This is a clear pattern of harassment and bad faith tendency," he said. "The public smearing, the threat, the deliberate property damage. You have more than enough grounds to proceed. They have violated the implicit agreement to treat the property with respect." He advised drafting a formal eviction notice, citing non-payment of the new rent and the property damage as cause. It would give them 30 days to vacate. There was no more room for negotiation. "Family disputes are the messiest," he warned. "They stopped acting like my family when they did this," I said, my voice resolute. When I got home, there was a voicemail from my mother. Her voice was trembling. "Anya, please, call me. We can fix this. Think of Chloe." It was the same tired refrain, the same emotional blackmail. I deleted it without a second thought. They weren't trying to fix anything. They were trying to regain control. That night, Ethan came over. He didn't try to soothe my anger, he validated it. He looked at the pictures of the tiles, his jaw tight. "They attacked your art," he said softly. "They attacked a part of your soul." He held me as I finally let the tears of rage and grief fall. The next morning, I called Mr. Peterson and told him to send the notice. The line had not just been drawn, it had been carved in stone. They had 30 days to leave Sea Glass Cottage. 30 days to vacate the life I had provided for them. My fight wasn't about money anymore. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my peace, and the beautiful, quiet life I had worked so hard to build. The 30-day notice period was a month of tense, charged silence. There were no more angry texts or manipulative voicemails. It was as if a switch had been flipped. They were communicating only through the cold formality of their lawyer, who sent a single letter confirming they would vacate the premises by the deadline. There was no apology for the damage, no acknowledgement of my years of generosity. Just a cold, legalistic retreat. On the final day, I drove to the cottage alone. Ethan had offered to come, his protective instincts on high alert, but this was something I needed to face myself. The Harborview streets were quiet in the late morning light, the sea air crisp and clean. A moving truck was parked out front, its ramp down, its belly half full of their lives packed into cardboard boxes. I didn't go inside. I just sat in my car across the street and watched. I saw my father, his shoulders slumped, carrying a box of books. I saw Grant directing the movers with impatient gestures. I saw my mother, her face a pale, pinched mask, wiping her eyes as she carried a small lamp. Then I saw Serena, ushering Chloe into their car. My niece's face was pressed against the window, her expression confused and sad. Our eyes met for a fleeting second across the distance, and my heart gave a painful lurch. This was the true casualty of the war her parents had started. When their cars and the truck were gone, I waited another hour before I finally walked up the path to the front door I knew so well. I unlocked it and stepped inside. The cottage was empty, stripped of their presence, but filled with a palpable aura of spite. The living room furniture I'd provided was still there, but askew. In the kitchen, the shattered tiles were a gaping wound in the wall. But they hadn't stopped there. A deep, jagged scratch ran the length of the beautiful old dining table I'd refinished by hand. It was a single, violent line, spelling out the word, selfish. My breath hitched. It was so petty, so childishly vindictive. This wasn't the act of a struggling family forced from their home. It was the parting shot of entitled people furious at having their free ride end. I walked through the rest of the house. They'd left trash in the corners of rooms, scuff marks on the walls, and a faint, sour smell of resentment in the air. I stood in the center of the living room, surrounded by the quiet chaos, and I didn't feel anger. I felt a profound, cleansing sense of relief. The toxicity had been excised. This was the proof, the final, ugly confirmation that I had done the right thing. This was who they were when they thought no one was looking. I spent the rest of the day cleaning. I scrubbed floors, aired out the rooms, and swept up the dust of their departure. As I worked, I found small traces of Clea's sparkly crayon dropped under a radiator, a single pink barrette in a drawer. I gathered these small treasures and placed them in a little box. She was the innocent, and I held on to the hope that one day, she would understand. Tucked under a magnet on the refrigerator was a small, folded piece of paper. It was a note in Chloe's shaky, first-grade printing. I'm sorry for the tiles, Auntie Anya. Love, Chloe. My throat tightened. I folded it carefully and put it in the box with her other things. She knew. On some level, she knew this was wrong. The next day, the healing began in earnest. I called the tile contractor and the furniture restorer. I hired a professional cleaning crew. I called a real estate agent I trusted, a woman who had sold me my own house. I want to rent out Sea Glass Cottage, I told her. At full market value. I want tenants who will love it. She was efficient and professional. For Harborview, $3,500 is exactly right. We'll find you someone wonderful in no time. She was true to her word. Within a week, she had vetted several applicants. I chose a young couple, a marine biologist and a novelist, who fell in love with the cottage on site. They talked about setting up a writing desk by the window and gushed over the garden. When I showed them the kitchen, I pointed to the newly repaired backsplash. The tiles are handmade, I told them. They're one of a kind. The woman ran her hand over the smooth, glazed surface. They're exquisite, she said, her appreciation genuine and warm. It feels like a home with a soul. Signing the lease with them felt like a turning point. They moved in the following month, their rent payment appearing in my account on the 1st, as promised. Standing outside the cottage one afternoon, watching them plant new flowers in the garden beds, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The house was no longer a source of obligation and resentment. It was what it was always meant to be, a beautiful home, appreciated and cared for, and a sound investment in my own future. I called my lawyer and sent him the photos of the damage, along with the repair bills. We filed a claim against their security deposit, which they predictably disputed. But with the mountain of evidence I had, the matter was settled quickly in my favor. It wasn't about the money. It was about accountability. With the storm past, my own life came back into focus. Ethan, my steady, quiet rock, had been there through it all. He had held my hand, listened to my fears, and celebrated my strength. He hadn't tried to fix it for me, but he had made sure I never felt alone while I was fixing it for myself. One evening, as we sat in my garden watching the fireflies begin to glow, he took my hand. "You're the strongest person I know, Anya Thorne," he said softly. And then he asked me to marry him. My yes was as easy and natural as breathing. The weight of my family's expectations had been lifted, and in its place was the lightness of a future I could build on my own terms, with a partner who saw me, respected me, and loved me for exactly who I was. I didn't know what the future held for my relationship with my family, or if there was anything left to salvage. But for the first time, I knew with absolute certainty that my own happiness did not depend on the answer. A few months after my family vacated the cottage, I heard through the grapevine of distant cousins that they had moved into a cramped apartment on the far side of the city, an area of concrete and strip malls that was a world away from the sea breeze charm of Harborview. Serena had to take on a second, part-time job. Grant was angrier than ever. My parents were keeping to themselves. The cousin who told me this did so with an air of sympathetic gossip, expecting me to feel a pang of guilt. I felt a quiet sadness for the situation they had created, but the guilt was gone. It had been replaced by the solid certainty of a boundary well drawn. One afternoon, a letter arrived in my mailbox, the envelope addressed in Chloe's careful, wobbly printing. There was no return address. Inside was a drawing of two stick figures, one tall and one small, holding hands under a rainbow. A single sentence was written at the bottom: "I miss your garden, Auntie Anya." Tears welled in my eyes. I carefully placed the drawing in the small box with her other keepsakes. I wanted to write back, to scoop her up and tell her I missed her too, but I knew any attempt to connect with her would have to go through Serena. I wasn't ready to open that door. Not yet. So I held on to the hope that our bond was strong enough to survive the distance, and I promised myself I would find a way back to her when the time was right. The subsequent months were a blur of joyful planning. Ethan and I decided on a small wedding, an intimate ceremony on the cliffs overlooking the ocean, just as the autumn sun began to set. We invited only our closest friends, the people who had become our chosen family. My maid of honor was a fellow potter who understood my heart without needing words. Ethan's best man was a friend who had helped him launch his business. I didn't invite my parents, Serena, or Grant. The decision was agonizing but necessary. A wedding is a celebration of love and union, and their presence would have felt like a shadow over that sacred space. It was not an act of punishment, it was an act of protection for the new life we were building together, a life founded on trust, respect, and mutual support, the very things my family had proven incapable of giving. The day of our wedding was perfect, kissed by a cool, salty breeze and bathed in golden light. I wore a simple, elegant dress, and in my hands, I carried a bouquet of wildflowers from my own garden. As I walked toward Ethan, who was waiting for me at the edge of the cliff, I felt a sense of profound peace. This was my future. This was my home. Our vows were promises we had written ourselves, promises to honor each other's work, to protect each other's peace, and to build a partnership that was a sanctuary, not a battleground. When he slid the ring onto my finger, it wasn't just a symbol of his love for me, it was a symbol of my love for myself, for the woman I had become. After a short honeymoon exploring the quiet coastal towns to the north, we returned to Port Blossom and settled into the rhythm of our new life. The rent from the cottage provided a steady, comfortable income stream, giving me the freedom to take on more ambitious artistic projects without financial pressure. I began work on a large-scale ceramic mural for the new city library, a piece that celebrated the history and natural beauty of our town. Letting go of my family wasn't a single event, it was a process. There were days I felt a phantom limb of grief for the sister I wished I'd had, for the parents I yearned for. But the constant ache of trying to earn their approval was gone. In its place was a quiet confidence. I had learned that true family isn't about obligation or blood, it's about who shows up for you, who respects you, and who celebrates your light instead of trying to dim it. Ethan, my friends, even my lovely tenants who sent me photos of the blooming roses in the cottage garden, they were my family now. I framed Chloe's drawing and hung it in my studio, next to a photo from my wedding day. It's a reminder of both the love that endures and the new beginnings that are possible when you have the courage to choose yourself. Some evenings, Ethan and I cook dinner together in our small kitchen, the windows open to the garden. We talk about our day, our dreams, the silly, simple things that make up a life. In those moments, surrounded by the peaceful world I fought so hard to protect, I feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The road had been painful, the lessons hard-won, but I had emerged from the fire stronger, clearer, and whole. I had learned to distinguish the weight of a burden from the grounding weight of clay in my own two hands. And I knew, with every fiber of my being, that I was finally, truly home.